Welcome, everybody, to the Jake Feinberg Show. My guest today is one of the greatest musicians that our country has ever been blessed to have. He's been on, although the numbers have been conflated at times, he's been on several thousand albums, and he's also been a part of many of the transitions of jazz, from acoustic jazz to electric jazz, from odd time signatures to straight ahead, quintets, quartets, and duos. He continues to be a leading spokesman on the future of jazz through his music and through his eloquence. He's a pivotal person as we move forward here in the 21st century and try to continually progress as a society. Ron Carter, it's just a pleasure to have you on the Jake Feinberg Show today.
Thank you for the invitation.
Ron, I wanted to ask you about growing up in Michigan. Who in your life, in the early years of your life, instilled in you the qualities of leadership and responsibility, and maybe more importantly, gave you a grasp of the history of where you came from?
My parents. Both of my parents have passed away recently. My mom lived till 99 and a half, and my father passed away shortly before that. But they're the ones who are responsible for me having the view I have.
How did they do it through? Did they do it consistently through face-to-face talks? Did they do it through faith? Did they do it through community? How did they instill these things?
By showing us how it would be to take care of a family of 10 people based on the times that were available. There wasn't a lot of work for African American adults in the States, certainly not the kind that paid any substantial kind of funds, and my father managed to feed and clothe and show love to a family of 8 kids, and 2 parents.
Can you talk a little bit about the kinds of things that you experienced? I had Richard Davis on my program a while ago, and he talked in very stark terms about the idea that as a black child, he couldn't walk down the street. If he walked down the street and looked at a white woman, he could have his throat cut. And I was curious as to what kind of experiences, racist experiences, you might have dealt with as a youngster.
Mine were a lot less dramatic, but nonetheless made an impression on me at the age of 5 or 6. That you look around and find the things are different somewhere else than what they are in your neighborhood, and you kind of add 2 and 2, and when you come up at 5, you understand that a new game is in play.
We elected a black president, and then all of a sudden, well, we're not a racist society anymore. In fact, I think it's almost more of a politically correct racism now. It's not outright lynching or killing or just using different bathrooms. It's almost more diabolical than that now. I mean, I'm pretty much I'm at a point now where I feel somewhat despondent, and I wasn't sure how you felt based on what you personally had to overcome, and as you see our political system, or as our societal system, how it works, and if it's working effectively, or if we've really made any progress since the civil rights movement of the '60s.
I'm sure there's progress made. How do you measure that? That seems to be an issue for historians. But there's no question that the tables are still not equally balanced. And again, as long as you have people who feel that I am a threat to their survival, there will always be difficult times ahead. There's no way I can convince them, or do I have the time or energy to convince them that I am not a threat to their well-being. I don't spend time really giving that a lot of thought.
What are you listening to that appeals to your ear these days?
Well, I'm listening to the Bach Brandenburg No. 3 right now, as a matter of fact, and on my next disc on my playlist is a Glenn Goldberg Variations. I really don't have the kind of time to monitor everyone else's business, music business. I mean, if I think that if they think that they can call me and I would be a help to their project, I would give certainly that thought, because we all have the same notes. But I really don't spend time. How to say this? I don't spend a lot of time looking at everybody else's kitchen. I'm here. I've been placed here to play a certain set of notes, and my job is to keep playing until I find that set. I have had my difficulty in feeling that in the world everything is okay and I'm okay too, and I don't feel that, so don't think I'm not aware of the troubles that we're facing here. President's election in the United States 2 years ago, that because that happened, everyone thought that we were okay. Well, we're not really okay, and as soon as people realize that we are not really okay, despite them having a clue already, when that congressman during one of the president's speech shouted out, "You were a liar," and I cannot imagine that being okay with people. That just kind of took me right out of the ballpark, and that this guy is still holding sway with his constituents. I mean, man, that just tells you that he's got his own ballpark going, and he's going to stay with it until someone puts him out. Well, I can't put him out, but I certainly cannot encourage him to keep doing what he's doing.
Yeah, I think that I heard it from a source the other day. Another musician. The idea is that the way our society works, for the most part, the jobs that people rely on, the investments people make, the institutions that people believe in. In many ways, people, constituents, like you said, they know the system is broken. They know it's broken, but yet everybody is reliant on it. I mean, where are my investments? They're in the stock market, or they're in mutual funds. Your places of faith. They might, who knows what they're preaching, but the point is, everything that we rely on is in desperate need of an upgrade, and nobody really knows how to do that. So yet they rely on the old tenets that are outdated, and clearly, I think people know, like you said, people know this is not right. They know it's not good, and yet we continue down that path, and I guess I don't know whether you just, maybe in a strange way, the election of Barack Obama actually was a great thing for our country, because it just shows how unevolved we actually really are as a people.
Well, I think no one's questioning that it was a major event, and if I gave it that impression of not giving any weight to that event taking place, I misled you. Clearly, it was a major event in our times. Unfortunately, when people saw that happen, they thought that everything was okay with the world, and they haven't looked around past their neighborhood to find out that's really not the case. One of the reasons is the time, just the pure hours that musicians played, as opposed 20 years, 30 years ago, as opposed to the set times being shorter and starting earlier. That's due to things that have nothing to do with racism. And one of the reasons, as I view it, that things have changed along that line, is that people don't go out that late at night. They don't go out at 1 o'clock in the morning. They have great big fat TVs in their homes. They have great recording gear. They have great playback material. They have their own society built in their neighborhoods. There really isn't that kind of need due to the lack of something in their homes that makes them go out to do something else. Years ago, we used to play 4 sets a week. When I tell my students that, they kind of look at me and blink, because they can't imagine not just playing that long a night, but people being in a nightclub at 2 o'clock in the morning, and a lot of people there.
Not being able to work within the team construct, you don't learn how to listen, you don't learn how to play within the group, you don't learn the dynamics of actually working within the construct of something greater than just yourself. So as a result, not only do you have a supply and demand problem, you also have an identity problem. Because many of the guys that I talk to, they talk about band leaders who, just one name that comes to mind is Joe Pass. Joe Pass was the leader of a band, but yet he never acted that way, because he was constantly playing with other people, and he was listening to them, and they all got to know how, they knew how to collaborate. I guess collaboration is lacking. I guess I would be curious to hear your as opposed to someone staying in their house by themselves playing a guitar with the headphones on, as opposed to being out with other people interacting and seeing the sort of camaraderie and unity and bridging of the gap, so to speak.
Attention. That's what leaders do in order to get their band work with a band of non-leader guys. Their job is to, among other things, get the public's attention.
It's a different ball game than it was before, and I just was curious if you had any ideas as to how to get jazz music back into the ears of the youth.
Well, one way to do that is by having the black media be responsible for spreading the word. They're pretty negligent in doing that, and once the early Jet magazine stopped putting their little in the back of the book, they have the best records of the month or the best records of this issue. Once the black, or they would send the Pittsburgh Courier or the Chicago Defender or Amsterdam News. They would send out a person to write about the jazz in the neighborhood. Once that stopped happening, people stopped, certainly in the African American neighborhood, stopped finding out who was in town, who was available to them to hear. Until these black media places begin to change their point of view and feel jazz is important enough for them to spend the time to send a writer to interview or to view this band, that's not going to change. They have a great responsibility in making this happen, and they're not doing their job. They're not being responsive to the needs, if they even see the needs of the black community being told that if you go out to this club, there's some great music. And they're not doing that until they assume that real BET. They don't have a real jazz program on their weekly. They have what they have. For whatever reason they tell you, they don't have a jazz program on this black network. It seems to me that part of the responsibility is theirs. I think it's not being covered.
Can you talk about some music that you listen to or that you see live that you don't see any media coverage picking up for?
Again, because I'm not home as we speak, it's so difficult for me to answer that question with any kind of authority because I don't have to. When I'm home, I'm kind of in the house. I've been on the road for a month of one-nighters, and I just look forward to being in my house, wearing my house shoes, and knowing where the light is for the bathroom.
Right. Absolutely.
So I can't really respond to that question because I'm not involved in those kind of listening hours. But from what I can tell from people tell me, they hear wonderful musicians playing. I just don't have the time to go out there to verify that this guy really plays, this guy plays really well.
So what kind of black media, or just in general, what were the strong media outlets that did cover jazz music in the major urban areas in the middle part of last century, like in Houston or New York or Detroit? Where you saw these, different types, like whether it was in Detroit or in Houston with the Crusaders, you had a West Coast movement of jazz. Who were the media outlets that were responsible at that time for really pushing jazz and giving it a national importance?
Well, I'd have to go to the library to pull out some books, but there's a magazine called The Urbanite came out in the late 50s, early 60s that had a nice jazz column. One of the early views of, the name just ran across, Essence. At one point they had a nice jazz column. At some point the Pittsburgh Courier had a nice jazz column. At some point in New York there was the BLS that had the late Billy Taylor as a great jazz disc jockey. And it was a great program. The Chicago Defender in Chicago. These newspapers, Daddy O'Dale had a great show in Chicago, and these newspapers not only encouraged people to listen to the radio stations, but told them where this person thought the great jazz was happening. And right now, that's not available to people to know.
When you talk a little bit about, if you would, when you began to the advent of jazz on the AM radio, the ability of when radio went from top 40 or most popular music to record play radio, did that have an impact on jazz as well?
Absolutely. The more it's available to people, once they knew that Symphony C was coming on at a certain time of day, or Will Moyle from Rochester, New York, had a great show. WRVR, which was sponsored by the Riverside Church in New York, had a great jazz station. Ed Beach was the guy's name. So there have been stations around where the people had a chance to make some decisions and find out who was in their neighborhood and go out and enjoy this music. Those options have been taken away for whatever reasons people want to say they took them away. And because they're not there, jazz is missing that kind of growing audience.
Ron, I wanted to ask you about the role. I mean, you've been on so many albums. It doesn't really matter how many because there's.
It doesn't. Go ahead.
Yeah. So can you talk about the role of the accompanist and what it meant, and what it means to music?
Well, for me, to accompany someone means I have to play well enough to have the recording and the music sound like I belong in that band, and I'm comfortable enough with the idea that if I get a chance to play with a variety of people, my view of music will be even bigger, so I can be of more help to these people, these musicians, whether it's Aretha Franklin or Paul Simon or George Benson or whatever the artist's name on the table is. My job is to play well enough so that these people feel that I belong in this band, and I belong on the next recording session. That's always been my goal as a sideman, to make these people feel that this is where I belong in their band, and to help them come to some kind of come to see their music come through fruition with my help with everyone else. Being a sideman is really awkward because you want to play well enough to have them hire you, but sometimes you're reluctant to leave your personality on the floor because you feel you can contribute to this music. So what you try to do is make everybody happy by playing the kind of bass line that will make their project feel like you hoped they would want it to feel, and that you have played comfortable enough for them that they don't feel that you are a threat to their view of music.
A threat. So the reality is you're there to make
them sound good.
Right.
That's my job.
But not be the center of attention.
And I tell my students, you got to make them sound better because you're playing with them.
Yeah, I was going to say that I was at Henry Franklin's house in Los Angeles, and
Skipper, yes.
Skipper, yeah, and
California.
Exactly, and it was striking to me because I went to wash my hands at his sink one day in his kitchen, and I look up and there's a billboard from I don't know what year, probably the early '70s, and it was a cool cigarette commercial, a billboard for cool cigarettes with a bass player, jazz player on the.
Yeah, but the bigger issue, Jacob, is that they decided that I would be a good representative as an African American bass player. Somehow you don't see that today. You seldom see a practicing musician, a jazz musician, a player advertising the kind of things that we all use, whether it's a suitcase or a car rental or a certain kind of food. In Japan, they don't seem to have that fear of having an African American be a spokesman for a product. And we don't get a chance to, the African American musician in the States doesn't get a chance to be thought of as a consumer of a particular product. And it's unfortunate that we don't get that kind of, they will hire an actor who holds the bass all wrong, who has no clue what to do with it. And he's representing not just the product, he's representing an occupation. And a lot of those guys are terrible as they model holding the bass.
And
we're taking venues from 4,000 seats to 200 seats. In Japan, they have these coffee houses where they bring in entertainment, either local guys or someone from the States, and they charge a pretty reasonable price for this 200 people to come to this small room with a great piano and have this band, in this case my group, play 2 one-hour sets, and they get a chance to, since they only see us by DVDs or maybe a television show, this is a chance to see the guys who make the music they like. we did four one nights in a row, and then we had a travel day off, and then 4 more nights in a row. And with Mildred Miller on piano and Russell Malone on guitar, we had a great physical musical time because there's a lot to do to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to get home at 1.
So it's a trio that you're with right now?
Yeah.
And it's a bass and it's
bass, guitar, bass, piano, and guitar.
Bass, piano, and guitar. So there's no drums, percussion.
No drums. No.
How does that? That's interesting. How does that change the sound, or how does that make it unique?
Well, it's not a new idea. Ahmad Jamal did it years ago with Ray Crawford and Israel Crosby, called the 3 strings. And if you look at some old YouTube, you see Nat King Cole playing with his guitar, bass, and piano trio when he was alive and singing and playing fabulous piano. I just thought there'd be time to try a different kind of sound and see if it's possible to make to have as much fun playing without drums as I have playing with them.
Exactly. I was going to say, another guy that I've tracked down on this journey that I'm on is a guy that you played a lot with. I was hoping you could talk about your experiences collaborating with him. Was Mickey Roker?
Yes, he's my Philadelphia buddy. I haven't seen him in a while.
He's doing great. I mean, I just visited him in Philadelphia on a trip. So he's doing fantastic. But you guys were on so many great sessions, and I guess you know what it is, Ron. I mean, personally, I can only speak for myself. I miss the boat, man. I mean, I miss that time. I miss that camaraderie. I miss the collaboration between all different types of people. And I think what you were talking about before, the idea that a company would want you as a representative for their company. The idea that they wanted a reputable person who knew their craft, who understood what they were doing. And that has gone by the wayside today. It's not about what you know, it's how you look, it's how you act, and really, essentially, the bravado, it's the chest bumping stuff. And that wasn't going on back, in the 60s and 70s. And I guess what I'm trying to do is bring a semblance of that back to our culture. The idea that it's okay to know, it's okay to be sophisticated. It's okay to be part of a cultural renaissance. It's okay to be like that. And I don't know why we're so insecure about that anymore.
Well, I'd like to give you an answer in 25 words or less, but it's a pretty complicated
I didn't expect that, but it's, whatever.
Complicated answer,
I just want to provide a semblance of normalcy, and I think you'd feel the same way about your grandkids and stuff. I opened my show in January, and I did a lot of topical stuff, education and immigration, politics, but I realized really early on, Ron, that my soul was going to die, and I didn't want to have sponsors, or I didn't want to have people supporting my show that I wasn't even that I was detached from. And I said, what do I really love? I said, what I really love is the vinyl that I collect and the time period that I love so much, and which is really the late 60s and early 70s of jazz. And I just started to go after the guys from that time period, whether yourself, all the bass players, John Hurd and the skipper, and Jim Huart and George Duke, and Pat Martino, and I've just tried to go after these people that have really have a lot to offer, and that frankly I think need to be more, in some way, more highlighted in our national dialogue. I think that it's missing now, and I understand that a lot of things can cloud it, but I don't feel we're that far away from regaining some of that as well. Am I wrong?
Well, I trust your point of view. I'll be around when I see it happens. I'll be the first guy, or maybe the second guy on that bandwagon.
So Ron, if as I move forward here, if you would just give me some in 25 words or less. Just would you give me a few pieces of advice as I move forward on this journey? Because I'm not a musician. I'm a listener, but I've been around enough people from the time period that I love to know that this is what humanity and this is what society is about. So if you would, please give me some guidance here as I move forward.
Well, what I recommend you do, first of all, is go out and try to hear some young people play. Young people meaning 10, 12, 13, and 14. There's some young high school bands around that you have to kind of search out to hear them. Go out and try to find these pockets of jazz programs in these elementary schools. They exist, but unfortunately they're not getting the same play as the high school basketball star or the high school football star or the high school tennis star or, if you're in California, the high school golfing star.
Right. No, and in Tucson too, the golf is big.
Okay. Yeah, okay, and try to find these pockets of jazz enclaves and see what is it, and ask these kids, what is it that makes them want to do this rather than play with their weed machine at home, and see what kind of answers you can get. That's my recommendation for you.
And one final question for you, Ron. When I know you didn't enjoy, or maybe you did, but you didn't play the electric bass for that long. But
because to play. To be as good as those guys who were already playing it, I'd already invested years into trying to play it upright. And I knew I didn't have that kind of time that would allow me to be competitive in a positive sense. So my choice was to, okay, well, I've already started this. Let me see if I can make something happen with this instrument. That's why.
Yeah, no, I was actually going to say I think you did provide a positive sound on the electric bass. Actually, I really love some of the stuff that you did on that.
Well, it's fun, but you know, if you look at the spectrum of guys who are playing today, and you got Victor Wooten, you got Marcus Miller, you got Steve Bailey, you got Bob Cranshaw. I mean, you got guys who really have put in the time to find out how the instrument works and what are the possibilities that they have found and what they've made on their own. I just didn't have that kind of time given me investing all this time in trying to play it upright to be able to do that. So don't feel that I didn't play it because it was not my favorite instrument. I love the guys play that stuff, man. I just didn't have the time then to develop what they developed or anything that would be compatible with their desire to make the bass do something they wasn't doing before.
If you could, when you think back, I know I was asking you about your childhood earlier, but when you look back at the early '70s, the work that you were doing with Woody Shaw on Blackstone Legacy, the stuff that you did with Mike Longo on The Awakening, maybe some of the stuff that you did, the early CTI stuff. How would you describe that period of jazz?
Well, my feeling, Jacob, is that if the jazz labels at that time had looked around to see how Creed Taylor was marketing that music, and by that I mean he had great covers, he had fabulous sound, he had a great stable of guys who really played well. I never understood why the other jazz labels never bothered to see this possibility and put it to work for them.
What did he, aside from...
Nothing else, his label set the tone for the covers. And of course, Rudy Van Gelder was and is the dean of recording engineers. I never understood why the companies who were in the business of making money never decided that they'd want to make money doing this, like Creed Taylor was doing. Because clearly he had a sound in his ear and a game plan in his mind that worked out very well for him and for the industry, for that matter.
Was it because that there were a lot of jazz purists, people that believed in bebop and acoustic instrumentation, that they didn't want to move and change with the music?
No, I think it wasn't that. I think the companies didn't make it available to people.
But why wouldn't they make it available?
I can't answer for them, Jacob.
Okay. Hey, Ron, I just want to tell you, man, I appreciate you taking the time and letting me work through these things, and I wish you continued success, and just
I'll see you along the way.
All right, brother.
You be careful.
Take care now.
Bye.
Bye-bye.